Y'all hear me? So the inquiry I shared that I was in just 2 weeks ago was that I was in a place of anxiety, just in relationship to whether it's Richard's or other forecasts for the future, and how important it was to create communities and start networking, and just kind of the idea being that we're going to need community um, to survive the times that we're in. And I was just noting that in contrast to, as I've grown older, my more hermetic, as in a hermit tendency, um, a bigger part, more than I feel inclined to go out and try to create a community. I feel inclined to live in solitude, on the side of a mountain somewhere. And so I'm just wrestling with all of prophetic encouragements to create community, at the same time that seems to be contrary to my desires, and not really knowing what to do with that, and just having some curiosity as to how other people are holding that, what I'll loosely call that prophetic encouragement. And I say, one of the other things that I'll say will causes me some anxiety about it. And I just had a chance to listen to yesterday's Clubhouse on stress, and Phil, loved what you had to share. Appreciated Jesse's reflection and others as always. But one of the things that causes me stress is to be in situations where there's a lot up relative to inclusion and exclusion. So this whole idea that we might need to create insulated communities that we are protected by and supported by, and there are people that want to get into those communities, and what are the values or what are the criteria or the popularity contest by which we judge who is able to come in and survive with us versus who is on the cold on the outside. Just living in those questions caused me a great deal of stress. And for me, it goes back to kind of the high school. I was never a part of a single clique. I got kind of had good connection, good rapport with like 3 or 4 different groups, and loved the freedom to circulate between them. And so just the whole idea that there might be a need to be identified and have my survival secured by some insulated community is just kind of anathema to who I think of myself as and how I like to roll. And the thought of it causes me a lot of concern. And I feel complete with that. And we'll happy to chime in also as the conversation continues, but that's my opening.
I feel kind of fairly lit up with that, because it's brought together a lot of things that have been happening since we last spoke of this over these last 2 weeks. And one of them was being invited to a birthday party of a friend of my partner's. And I was just kind of noticing the whole journey of that, like a buildup of nervousness or tension of sort of being in a place full of strangers and having to make small talk, which I sometimes find excruciatingly painful. And the anxiety of kind of predicting that there'll be those places, those uncomfortable places where you're with a group of people and no one is speaking, and hence like a nervous, talkative part of me kind of comes forward and just talks too much and doesn't ask enough questions of the other, because I'm just kind of in a place of anxiety. And it was interesting watching like where I would approach someone and just begin to start a conversation, or where someone else approached me and started a conversation. And anyway, I met a guy I think he was really high on coke the whole party, the whole evening, but it was just interesting where the conversation went. And I spoke a little bit about my immigration status, and he said, like, oh, do you have any skills? And I mentioned one of my degrees, and he sort of said, well, we need that here. Like, we need that sort of sustainable design for urban planning in this city. And I work with a lot of these people in the city council. I don't know what you call it here, but and he said, he gave me his number and sort of said, I'll introduce you to someone, and that way you'll easily get sponsorship for staying in the country. And so that was an interesting kind of breadcrumb, and also it just brought up like a lot of my fears around being around people. And so this contemplation on the 52 at the moment being the mountain season, and how much I notice I love being amongst the mountains. And it's partly because there's no one around. I don't have to deal with all of that, those sorts of fears of like, how should I be with all of these, with these people? How should I be in the village? How should I be in community? How should I engage in it? So I'm looking for all these shoulds. I'm looking for these kind of rules. And then the next sort of piece to happened all yesterday. Like, I received this email from my girlfriend about a series of events going on Vancouver Island through Ian McKenzie, who's this filmmaker, and he did the film Sacred Economics with Charles Eisenstein, and he's done a few other sort of documentaries that are really good, really well made, really beautifully produced. And he's working at the moment in Tamera, which is an eco village in southern Portugal that I've visited and spoken to some of the people of, but never stayed in. And when they set up, it was a group of Germans who really wanted to break away from the old culture and create something entirely new, which was actually quite ancient. And it was to bring back the wildness of men, partly. There's a really strong link between that wildness and eroticism, sexuality. And he mentions Iron John, this story that was made famous by Robert Bly, which was a kind of book for men, a story for men, and mentions to release the wild man, which each of us has exiled at some point because of kind of conforming to what is appropriate in this more civilized society, which got rid of the wildness of Pan and paganism in the past, and witchcraft and so on. And so we put that aside, we locked him away. And the key is kind of in this story, the key is under our mother's pillow. So when men do not fully break from their mother in some way, and I don't understand what that would mean, what that break would mean, but then we tend to embody a lot of shame around sexuality. And and anyway, this event sort of, I looked at this series of events and was reading all the blurbs about them, and was sort of thinking, man, this was everything I was looking at while I was looking after Matthew's house and dog a couple of weeks ago. And then later on in the evening, another friend of mine sent me a ticket for tonight's event, which is the sort of the first event that's kind of happening from Ian McKenzie, is just doing an evening. And I signed on for this 3-day retreat, this 3-day workshop later on in July with the same guy, just a bit further up north on the island. So I've been left all of these breadcrumbs, and they lead towards this rediscovery of this wild man, this wildness within, and also toward how to be in community. And I think how to be in where the wildness kind of is connected through my perception is through this ability to have firm boundaries and also a certain amount of exposure, amount of vulnerability. And the reason why I brought in Tamara, what the guy is doing there, he's making another film on that, is because what those Germans originally intended was for to bring back that wildness into community and have a polygamous. They kind of research polygamy, so they encouraged people to have multiple partners, and then they would watch what happened, watch the jealousies that came up, watch the possessiveness that arose, and it was I mean, it's a decades long piece of research, and they came up with the forum, which is a place where people's shadows do get exposed, and where people are encouraged to be really vulnerable and honest. Like, yeah, I'm really attracted to that guy, and I fancy that guy, and I fancy that guy also. I'm scared to talk to that guy, and just to bring up like what's sort of going on inside them, and all of these. I don't know what more to sort of say on this, but it's just been interesting following these breadcrumbs, following this trail, and feeling pulled into this kind of work, this men's work. Anyway, I'll finish there for the moment. Thanks for listening.
Curious. One thing I need to voice my thing. I don't understand why you're streaming this. If you're sharing, we can't hear why.
It was a conversation that several people wanted to be a part of that aren't here. And it's not public, it's just on my private channel. And then I'll make it inaccessible to anybody but the group.
Okay, thanks for that. Because I already live feeling observed, and this freaks me out. So I'm just going to put that on the table. But I want to talk to Howard's thoughts. It's not Howard, but Howard. Hi, Howard. Curious that, and I'm sorry if I missed the intro to that, but this is a little HD stuff, but I only have 2 channels, and they're not individual. So I'm built for the collective. I'm also built for the tribe. The tribe to me speaks more to the fractal lines. And the irony is I'm here to serve people, and I don't even like people. So that fits on top. That's a layer on top of what you were talking about of, okay, if we're going to survive the coming changes, and we are going to survive the coming changes, many of us will. Coming changes. The change is already underway. Let me rephrase that. Yes, our groups, who are we going to be hooking up with in order to get through this? That's one of my questions as well, because I'm not built to live with people. I'm just not, and I'm okay with that. I like being the wizard in the back of the property that you have to meander through the woods to find me in the cave. I'm really, really good with that. So I've been dealing with that myself. But at the same time, I also recognize that these fractals are going to become more evident to us. Okay, there are people that you meet on a daily basis that you're like, oh wow, that person's very familiar, even though I've never met them. I may never see them again. These are little hints of relationships that have yet been untapped, to my experience and my way of seeing things today. And there's a million people for whom this is the answer. Like, sorry, not my table, can't serve you. That's okay too. We're not here for everyone. So the trick is to get out of our own way, which is what we're all doing by diving deeper and deeper and deeper into who we are as individuals. And then we find out, because like when you look at the universe, when you look up at the night sky, yeah, some stars shine brighter than others. You know what I mean? But they're all needed. They're all there for a reason. And so we coexist for the same purposes. It's like we don't even know whether we understand it or not. And I don't feel like we even have to. I don't know, this is not nearly as the depth that I was hoping to share at the moment, but I think you're getting that you're not alone in this thought process, first of all. And that it's, that's why I love this work so much. Literally, the more we get out of our own way, the more we can hear, the more we can see, the more we can feel each other. Okay? If you and I were to sit down, Howard, there would be parts where like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then other parts like, who the fuck is this guy? You know? And it doesn't matter because ultimately the aspects that we share are going to be the parts that are important to us in terms of helping us go forward together or not. Because that's something that's, you know, your body determines. I always go back to the Star Trek episode, I Am For You, James T. Kirk. You know, when the landing party arrived on the planet and there were 3 women and each one was designated for the solo crew member. I don't know if you remember this. If I have to, I'll go find it and bring it back because I can. But I really feel like that's what a fractal is like in our world. There are people that come together because there's just, you know, genetically, I'm being careful with my words here. We were designed to be together. I think that actually fits. I'm going to let this gestate more because there is a lot more. And this is literally where I'm spending my time these days. I don't care about numbers. I don't care about the star. I mean, yes, I study all of it, but I don't care about any of it anymore. What do I feel in this moment about the person in front of me? That's all that matters. And I think that's what we're going to really come down to. Because that's the only thing we have that we can navigate from. Everything else is mental nonsense. It's the mind going, jump, monkey, jump. And we're really good monkeys. We're really good at jumping. Matthew, you know what I'm talking about. You're smirking. Thank you for that. Anyway, at peace for the moment. Recorded for whatever purpose.
Well, I was talking earlier and my mic was muted. I put in the chat, well, I forgot his name again already, is doing the piece on the
Mark
55.
Bentley.
Mark Bentley, there we go. And the other thing that this keeps bringing up for me, and I thought about it a couple times throughout the week, is this book called The Fifth Sacred Thing by Starhawk, which she wrote about 20 years ago. But it was a futuristic, utopic, as well as dystopic view of the future. And being that she wrote it 20 years ago, you can see how the lines of what she was talking about have, a lot of them have come true. But it was, in a sense, a group of people that broke off from society. In a nutshell, a quick explanation of the book. Water became the most valuable commodity. The government collapsed. The next most powerful entity was pharmaceutical companies. So they took control of water. And they joined with a radical religious group to say, well, do what we tell you to do, or you're deemed to have no soul. And if you have no soul, we can do whatever we want to you. But a group broke off in San Francisco and created their own society, where all religions were honored, where all sexualities were honored. They didn't call it polygamist, but sexuality was a lot less defined as to you connect with someone or you don't. And they built an entire society based off of the natural resources that they had. And it's an amazing book. The dystopic side was the people that they could do whatever they wanted to. They engineered soldiers and hookers and pretty much took whatever they wanted. And they ended up having to fight a war. But the group in San Francisco was nonviolent and had no weapons. So they fought a war of nonviolence. And they won. So it's a book I highly recommend. So it sort of frames my thinking about where we are going as a society, how those different ways of living could and most likely will come about. So that's it for me on that subject for now.
It's funny, Starhawk's teaching a course on permaculture about 15 minutes down the road from us tomorrow. So if anybody can make it over here for the week, get an immersion.
I was thinking, so my core wound is separation. And when I think of community, I think of oneness, and I think about how this transition we're going through is this move to oneness, this move away from feeling that we're separate than others. And when you talk about your anxiety, Howard, that's anxiety is separateness, right? It's I'm feeling the separateness between us. It's coming to the fore. It's coming out. And so I looked up the definition of community: a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. Example, the scientific community. A feeling, in the second definition, is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. The sense of community that an organized religion can provide. And then I think of like Thoreau on Golden Pond, right? And his commune with nature. And if there's oneness, it's not just oneness between humans. You know, it's oneness between the spirit world, the ancestors, Gaia, nature, and the human world. And so maybe we don't find our community in the part of this culture which we don't have particular characteristics in common. We're not feeling that fellowship, that common attitudes, interests, and goals. Especially if what I continue to think on is oneness, and then I go and I see the divisiveness that is so prevalent in the political nature right now, but in the whole society right now. That takes me away from oneness when I fall into that, when I allow that news to come over me, that gets me away from oneness. When I sit on my porch, maybe smoke a little pot, and then feel into the trees in the backyard, I feel that oneness. I feel in community on my porch. And when I have a person that I love sitting next to me on that porch, I feel in community, and I feel in community with nature and with that person. So I think that some part of this struggle with community is, who is our community? Where is our community? I feel I've been in a cave for 4 years following this spiritual thread. And just now reaching the point of stepping out of that cave and into the sunlight. But I don't think I'm there yet. I don't think I'm there yet. I think there are people that I have community with that go very deep. And that's where I like to tread. I have a hard time with small talk and with not talking about things that matter. But my brother and his son own a bar, so I go to this bar, and it's a redneck bar. And so many of the people just show small-minded views. And what I mean by small-minded is just a lack of openness to consideration of other ways of discussion of the big thing right now is, God damn it, don't drink a Bud Light. You show exactly who you are. You drink a Bud Light. What? But that, and they're fantastic people. They're some of the nicest, kindest people in the world. But until I feel there's an openness to talk and to really attach, to really commune with them at a deep nature, I don't feel they're my community. They're the people around me, but I'd welcome into my community, but they would have to open to a level that I could feel like I could commune with them. Yeah. So that's my thoughts for right now. Thanks for listening.
I'd like to share something else again, I guess, as my turn. Phil, I know you've been, well, first let me ask this question. Have any of you guys seen the podcast or the YouTube with the Deja Blue is the name of the podcast with Richard Rudd and Zach Bush? You guys watched it? Ron has. It's pretty extraordinary, but Phil, there's one section in there that I'll read to you guys that just kind of blew me away. Zach Bush talking about what it means to connect with the wildness in ourselves. Let me read it. So this is Zach Bush talking. This is his lion story. He says, there are keystone species that are capable of observing your wildness that you don't even know exists. You only know the human five senses version of yourself. And at midnight, my first night in Africa, I came face to face with two white lions. White lions, the largest lions in nature. They are about 550 pounds. The males are about 550 pounds, 30% larger than a yellow lion. Massive. Two white lions met me feet away from me in the full moon, and I'm frozen just by the biological phenomena of being around this much energy. I cannot move a muscle for the near hour that this moment existed. And so that was the first time that I had been witnessed, because I have so many defense mechanisms to make sure other humans don't see me. I have an egoic shield that has been trained over 200,000 year process to be a superstar and making you not see me. I've developed a way to shine that shield such that when you look at me, you think you're seeing me, but all you're seeing is your own reflection. And so we walk around thinking we see beautiful humans, but when wild lions look you in the eye and remind you of who you are, you realize you missed the entire story of your life, because you are a wild freaking creature and you didn't come here to be contained. You didn't come here to be contained by the five senses or anybody else's laws or some sort of marriage construct. You are a freaking wild beast, and you are beautiful and you are frightening in your capacity, because the lion remembers you and it sits there and says, hell yeah, you are back. And you showed up right now at the tipping point of all things. I'm freaking glad you came. Let's get this thing on. Let's amp this thing up. You are a wild creature. And he goes on to say, that it doesn't necessarily require, you coming face to face with a 550-pound lion, but that even the trees can observe us, but that there is something of being observed, the observer effect in relationship with nature that actually provokes and is generative to the emergence of our wild creature. I thought that was pretty fascinating.
And I'd add a piece to that, that what if in that we don't understand our own power to the point of power over these two lions because of who you are as a spirit. I mean, that's the majesticity of our spirit world that I think might be just starting to tap into, starting to feel into.
Yeah, a quick riff on that Chris, is, participated in a couple like vision quest type ceremonies in the Lakota tradition, and the medicine men leading us would always tell us, if you're in spirit, you don't have to worry about animals. So there's something that I'd never thought of it though, in terms of them witnessing something of how powerful our spirit is, that and how much respect they have for a human spirit in the spirit. But yeah, just connecting some dots to that for me.
So Zach Bush wasn't attacked by the lion?
No, as he tells the story, like literally 2 550-pound male white lions were within feet of him for an hour. Basically, he's just staring him in the eyes.
I knew that they didn't attack you, but I just asked that question again because I really wanted to listen to you confirming that he wasn't attacked, because I just can't believe that. And thank you. It feels so powerful. It feels something out of this planet.
Yeah, what did I say? I'll pop a link to that video in our group chat. It's about a little more than 2 hours. Richard has a lot of profound things to say as well. And the riff between Zach Bush and Richard is pretty extraordinary.
I also read the short story you posted on Facebook about the dolphins who were asking for help. The way they communicate with you, but I don't know, it's just I just feel like when you connect to yourself with your higher self, then that's the time where you can connect with animals in that way as well. And sometimes it's beautiful to interact with animals. And I'm gonna share now, I've been having a hard time dealing with myself, because for some reason my mom, after my mom left back to Colombia, she was here for almost 2 months. I started feeling like a lot of sadness because she was going back, and I was not gonna be around her presence anymore, physical presence. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna let myself drown on this sadness, which really petrifies me. It really makes me it really freezes me somehow, and I cannot move. Even it actually hurts to start like moving and doing something for myself. And I was like kind of trying to deal with that and tackle that in the best way. And the word that's been in my heart like all this time, it's been sovereignty, because as soon as I start feeling sad, or this pain on my chest that I talked about last time with you as well, with all of you. I kind of start getting like moving, like I start moving my body, I start dancing, I try to go for a jog or whatever, and all of a sudden my reality changes as well. So it is really like a concrete and very clear example of how I gain power over my life, over my surroundings, over my reality and what I want to experience. And it's been beautiful because every time I feel like I'm going down that rabbit hole where I lose control of my own sovereignty, I tense my muscles, I tense my abdomen, and I kind of straight up my back, and I start breathing and just feeling present, because I know that sadness is actually trying to take me back to the past where I was sharing with my mom, or farther to the future where I'm actually worrying about something, and I just stay present. And it has helped me so much. And whenever I feel like that is happening, I just go back to those tools that help me gain sovereignty again. And it has worked. It has worked. So the last 2 or 3 days, I stopped drinking coffee, or I don't want to turn to alcohol to drink a beer or whatever, or to eat too much sugar, because I really want to live this physicality, experiencing this, all these emotions that feel also mentioned as part of being human. And as I said as well, that time I just feel like I'm feeling human and getting close to humanity. So it's been quite intense. It's been quite intense, and it feels like I'm kind of getting the gist. When I'm going through a difficult time, I just feel like, well, this is really what I came here to this planet for. And the moment I accept that, and I'm like, oh, I'm so blessed to have you all. I'm so blessed to be able to express my feelings, to be who I am, and really to surrender to all these things that are happening. And then I just get to listen to other people talking about the universe aligning, and everything is like, things are happening everywhere just in order for us to be united and everything. So even though it looks like, in my case or in my eyes, it looks like it's really far away, when the human being reaches a point where we are in harmony, somehow it feels like we're really close to it. And I think that is the part of living in fractal world, where I can reach this harmony, fractal harmony with my community, what Chris was talking about as well. It is like, yes, we are living amongst all people that are actually are not aware maybe of being spiritual beings and energy source beings, but there are others that are really far ahead, and these others, I feel, are you. And it's like, wow, I just step out of the door and I start living my own life and everything, and all of a sudden I just meet you, and I'm in another reality. And that also happens to me with a couple of friends that I had before, and for some reason I stopped talking to them. We stopped the contact, and like 10 years after, we started like talking and connecting again on this level, and it feels just amazing. So just to cut this long story, I would say that, to put it in a nutshell, it would be that I've gained sovereignty, and that has given me that has just lift me up. That has lifted me up, and that has given me kind of a sense of security, that I am in control of my surroundings as much as I could, and if it's not, if it goes out of control, then it's because I'm just gonna get ready and enjoy the ride as much as I will be willing to do it. And I haven't been I have been like doing this qigong in practice, and it's pretty interesting because I'm one of the few foreigners that are actually going to do qigong here in German, in the German language. And I had a breakthrough last time when I was on the seminar, and my teacher said to me like, well, I always had issues with the language because I didn't know, I don't know how to say that in German, and sometimes it doesn't flow. And then my teacher said like we know you, we see you as you are. You think that we don't know that what you're feeling. And she said to me, we know what you're feeling, but that doesn't change who you are. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's just seeing me here naked with all my flaws and my worries and everything. And we know who you are, and everyone here in this room knows who you are. So what are you worried about? And it's gonna be like that in your real world as well. Like when you go out there and start teaching qigong and everything, you just and that kind of released so much tension of me, because I was like, well, yes, that's true. I mean, who am I just to pretend to be someone who I'm not? It's just a lot of waste of energy. So that was kind of another encounter, it's just a little reminder of my essence, actually. And but my essence is really not caring about how well I speak or what language I speak or how fluent I speak, but my energy and my frequency. Yes. Thank you for listening. Love you all.
Yeah, I love that piece about the exposure and truly being seen, because there's a part of me that wants to be seen, but just the good sides, and then there's another part of me that wants to hide the rest of it, and to avoid some kind of humiliation. I think there's a sort of fear of humiliation there, and I really believe that to be truly in community, even with the people that Ron, you were talking about, like the fractals that just naturally gravitate together, there needs to be that kind of nakedness. There needs to be if those people I really trust can be with that, be with my nakedness without any sense of a judgment or a criticism in some way, then man, how freeing would that be? How much of the 55 would sort of come through in that? That would be so beautiful. But I just know there are still parts of me that I just don't fully accept yet, or don't want to unclothe.
Well, that's reminding me of Robert now working in the nudist camp that gets to be naked.
I was going to say something about that too. All this talk of nakedness. I was like, I wonder how Robert's getting along.
Well, it's up to you, Matt or Jesse. If you
think I can share. I apologize for missing the beginning there. It was actually kind of interesting. I was on an important call. This is important too. But it seems like it's kind of related in a way to what's being talked about here. or maybe it isn't, I'm not sure. But yeah, I wish I'd heard the beginning because I could feel the fire as I came on and was hearing Ron's sharing, and was just, oh, I missed the beginning here. But the community and communitas piece, I mean, what was happening this morning is I was on a call where, and it kind of speaks to in a little bit to what Phil was just talking about, and just my appreciation for a group like this where we can be in that nakedness of the, you know, to be able to reveal those aspects of ourselves that we don't like, the shadow, because I can see what happens when we don't take that accountability for that. And because what was happening is the group of us were meeting, it was all men in the group, and we're meeting about somebody in our community here, and it's not Phil, somebody in our community here who has been, he's at an edge right now where if he doesn't begin to look inward and take ownership of some of the things that are happening, he is just going to continue, he's going to destroy his own, continue to ruin his own, like, reputation, I guess you could say. It's like, for me, he kind of, it's like, wow, like, please, I pray that this work that we do can mean that I'm never in a situation where he's been, you know, he's known throughout the community as there's suspicions of rape, but nobody has come forward. There is definitely toxic behavior with women and things that have been, you know, and it's, so we were having this conversation about like bringing this accountability back to him without him feeling like he was being attacked. And it was this gathering of men coming together, and like, it was, these were all really solid guys, and we all took we kind of paused at the beginning, like, we haven't gathered together for a long time like this. And it's a shame that this is what we're gathering around, because there's so many other things that we'd like to gather around. But here's somebody who's literally terrorizing the community, and we're working, you know, as somebody that has very publicly, it's like the greatest salesman on earth, basically. They've convinced the world of their magic, but underneath there's this piece that is just destroying other people's lives. And some people have stepped forward before. And so we were gathering together, and it was like, how do we do this? What do we do about this? To not ostracize and cancel this guy, but to be able to say, hey, you know, these are the things that are showing up and across the island in relation to this. And, you know, we were also talking about a friend of ours who lives on Salt Spring Island, and he started up a thing a few years ago called Man Ventures. And Man Ventures is they meet up every week and they go on an adventure, and it's a group of guys, and it's just for fun, you know, and bonding and connection. I don't know if they have the same kind of depth of conversations that we have, or if it's just like, you know, but one of the other things that they do is that every week or every month, I think it is actually, one of the guys kind of gets to be the featured person in the community, meaning that if he needs something done at home and he's not had the time to do it, all the guys come together and they work on this project with him. So it gets done, you know? So there's probably a lot less complaining wives on Salt Spring Island as a result of this, because there's the support and it's getting done. And so I'm just like getting these glimpses of these different ways in which community is kind of gathering together. And, you know, at the end of this conversation as well about this guy is like, you know, we just, to be really able to have those connections where it's not just about always healing something within the community, where there is the adventures, the coming together in like playful, you know, communion with one another. And as this would talk of the community, and also, and Howard's probably heard this, maybe others as well, but Michael Mead, who's got a great podcast and shares a lot of his wisdom. And one of the ones that really impacted me was when he was talking about communitas and community. And that community creates this kind of expectation of, and there's a lot of sameness, like Chris was speaking to. It's like they gather around a certain ideal or way of being or something like that. And so there's a lot of these expectations. And he says at the same time, we're evolving so quickly. There's so much transforming so quickly that one group that we resonate with 1 minute, 10 months later, we're not resonating with them and we're moving on. There's something new forming. And so, we create this rigidity around of expectation around community in that sense. Whereas communitas is much more kind of spontaneous. Like there is a gathering together, a coming together in a space of common union, in a space of it comes from an inspired place, whatever it might be. Maybe Man Ventures might be considered that kind of thing, although they have kind of a community around that, and that it forms for a certain particular time, and then it serves its purpose, but then it kind of goes off on its way. And he shared a story about, I think it was a group of guys that came together for a rock concert or something like that, and there was just this whole communitas that experienced around that. Not just at the event itself, but around it in the weeks and days around it. But then it kind of like they often went their way. They all felt the sense of completion and fullness from it. And so I've really, contemplated that a lot, because I think, I'm a 5'1". I think a few of us here are the 5'1s, and it's like, okay, all the hands coming up now. And I just remember where especially where Ra talks about, it's like, I think he actually uses the word antisocial, which I don't consider myself necessarily antisocial, but I can see that, it's like the solitude, the importance of solitude and that for me. And also when I do connect with others, that it's a space that nourishes all involved, not just me. Like there was a time in my life where I went to a community, and if it didn't nourish me, I left. It was, purely self-focused in that sense. Whereas now it's like, I like to think there's a little bit more of, okay, yeah, the nourishing of both myself and others in this space. And, I think I would echo in what Yamith said, and especially where this group of people that comes together every 2 weeks, and, we don't have things that we do necessarily outside of this space together, but when we come together, there's just such deep communion and conversation that I really appreciate. And what I'm noticing is I experience that more and more in life now too. I am at the same time really inspired right now with this group of people that we've just kind of reconnected. I think COVID kind of separated us a lot. And this unfortunate event is kind of bringing us together, but we're looking to expand beyond it too into, well, what else? Because these are people I would really work with. These are people I really like, and what can emerge from that, but not an expectation of community in a sense, because oftentimes I have gone to community and it's like, well, I like these things about this community, but here's something they won't like about me. So I disappear from that, right? Or whatever it might be. So, yeah, I think I'm bringing it to, and what Chris was saying too, it's that even though, it's like, I may not like a particular group but to still recognize that oneness, that oneness doesn't mean I have to like everybody or that I have to connect with everybody, but that I can recognize that we are this one giant being, exploring each other in many facets. So yeah, this current thing with this guy in our community is reflecting a lot for me. And I think it's also really these guys that are doing it, we've worked with groups before, so we're not calling out somebody and shaming them for their shadows. It's like, hey, we've noticed this, and we really, there is this kind of cancer culture approaching you. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but we really love for an opportunity here for you to take this piece and just see the people you've hurt and listen to the people you've hurt and do it in a very private way, not in a big way. We're not out to out him and out him in front of the community or anything like that. But it's these other guys that are involved in this process have gone through this before. And so there's this real restorative justice piece that's coming through in the exploration. And we don't know where it's going to go or anything like that. But I have to say that, I appreciate this kind of community and collaboration, as it were, where we get to speak to and voice these shadows while they are possibly, not consuming our lives and affecting and hurting others. And yeah, more to think on later, but I think that's where I'm at right now. I think I'm complete for now. Thank you.
It's Jesse, isn't it?
That's right.
I just wanted to ask something. Who wanted to speak as well? Sorry.
No, I was just kidding.
Matthew, what if that person is experiencing a very dark side of himself or herself, and he's, so to say, harming people outside of the community, of the communitas? But what if that person is harming somebody inside the community, inside the group? Because for me to address, in my opinion, very personal, obviously, to address a problem and to kind of expose it in that way, it is like, in my opinion, that person will solve it faster if he sees it himself, if nobody helps him or actually unveils the reality, but he sees it from the inside. And the other thing is like, okay, if this person is having an issue with a person outside of the community, with somebody outside of the community, but if it's inside, then it's very, very clear that it has to be addressed, because it will be impacting someone inside that group.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah. And the way it's being presented, and these other guys have more experience in it than I do, because they've had to deal with situations similar and they've learned from it. And it is really, putting it on his table, because he's got to want to change, right? And so it's putting it in that way. So it's not us forcing anything upon him. It's saying, this is what's happening. Is this something you're willing to look at for yourself? And here's the challenge from within here. But these things are messy, and the people that have gone through it before, there's been certain things that have blown back on them, and there are these it's something that, as we were gathering, the person who was most experienced, who's gone through this most before, he said he's gone through it so many times before. He says, like, it would be really cool to kind of set up a template for how you approach this in such a way. So yeah, it has to be on him to change. It's not anything, we're not going to shame him into it, where that approach isn't going to work. It's nothing like that. And so we're approaching him as people within his community, and there's going to be, we're preparing a letter, but it's going to be a long thought out letter, not just like, here, we're writing this right now. And again, I say this, that there's 7 of us in the group, and that 2 or 3 of them have done this many times before, and it's their wisdom that I'm relying on in many ways.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Just to be short here, I have had these thoughts that because we are a solid group and we've been together for so long, and I was like it's just a possibility that we can offer help for somebody who really needs it and asks for it. And that was kind of what Matthew said, was like, took me straight to this imagination, to this scenario that I've been having in my head for a long time. Obviously, it's not with the intention to put it in practice or do something about it, but I just wanted to express that we are very, mature to be able to start like with a healing process for somebody who wants to come and join us for a session that we might help this person, her or him. But I'm just gonna leave it there on the table, and I wanted to express that just because I've had the feeling that I guess I'm just really proud of ourselves.
I guess I can share. Yeah, community's been something really interesting through my whole life, where I forget who it was sharing about, not being in one clique, but in multiples, like kind of being a nomad, or being a friend of the weirdos and the misfits, being a friend of the jocks, being a friend of the, being deep in the music community. Just kind of like feeling connected to many, but also feeling other. I'm not a 5'2", I'm not a 5'1", I'm a 5'2", which even makes me feel even a little bit more ostracized or hermetic, I don't even fit in with the 5'1s or whatever. And so, but it's okay, right? It's my journey, it's my path. It's without identifying with it, I just accept it as something. And so I've always felt the draw for community, and yet felt very challenged at actually creating it, right? Because it's like, oh, community is this idea or ideal of coming into unity with people, and it never seems to do that with community. There's always conflict. There's always people. There's fucking predators that need to be addressed. There's all sorts of different things, and so certainly love the communitas, which is more an ethos and an action rather than community, which is a thing. It's like communitas is like, if you're wanting a good neighbor, be a good neighbor. If you're wanting to be in communion with someone, like just do it, like offer that for yourself, and which I found to be really refreshing in my life. I had a lot of visions about a lot of things for a long time. I was trying to fix the world or fix communities or fix what's wrong. And the only thing I can fix is myself. And mostly it's by fixing the control that my mind has on things, my own perception and all. And so it's beautiful. So to come in like a bit more practically now, like we moved and bought a home just before COVID struck, like 2 months or 3 months before COVID shut the world down. And so really lucky, because they stopped lending. I don't think I could have gotten the house that I have now or anyone. I've been self-employed for 10 years and jumped through all these hoops, and we just barely snuck through. And so we bought a new home, but it's in a new town. And so we're leaving the community that we've had for the past decade or 15 years, and we're moving to a new space. And just as we're landing and painting the house and moving in and ready to meet the neighbors, everyone's terrified of each other, and you're supposed to stay at home and not talk to anyone. And the last thing you're going to do is ding dong, ring a doorbell with a mask on and be like, hey, here's some cookies or whatever. Like, I'm the new neighbor. It was all impossible. And so there was this deep sense of isolation. However, we moved across from these ponds and we're hanging out with bald eagles and eating mushrooms and, they hanging out with herons and the world's going to shit, and we couldn't tell. It was awesome. It was really amazing, but it was totally hermit, you know? And so just last night, the whole neighborhood has had babies. And so now the babies are starting to walk and talk. And there's literally like, I think 5 kids that are within Maya's, 6 months of Maya's age. And so literally we live on like a little cul-de-sac with all these families and all these little kids. And without even recognizing it, there is actually a community that's popped up. And everyone's kind of, there's some beers involved last night, but like kind of that social lubricant of people like letting their guard down and actually saying, I'm really grateful that there's these families and that you're moved in here and that we have this little zone. And it's not the community I would have chosen. Like people across the street are pretty rough. Reminded of like Chris's redneck bar. You know what I mean? Like I don't talk about the Gene Keys yet with them, and I don't talk about walking with Thoth and the Hermetic philosophy and, like all of this stuff. We talk about guns and cars and whatever, tattoos and it's okay, right? Because in the past, I think I would have been a bit more, oh, well, I wish that this person was part of this community. I wish that this topic or this vibe was part of this community. And instead, just letting it come into unity, just letting what already is be at my doorstep and not closing my door and turning away, but actually letting those who I may have judged in the past as rough around the edges or blah, 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 blah. That's okay. That's part of the unity too. And so, but there's a bit of sadness too. Like I moved to Loveland and then my posse, my DJ crew of 15 years scattered like seeds to the wind, they're like in Utah, in Detroit, in Florida, like it's done. You know what I mean? Like we're like spread to the wind, and these are like the 3 or 4 amigos. And now I'm truly got my wish to be the heretic hermit. And yet I'm really feeling that draw for community and the challenge as well. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Are you able to talk, Neo?
Hi guys, I just knew I had to be with you tonight. I had a meeting just before. I'm taking my dog to his other daddy. So I'm going to obviously look straight ahead. I traffic lights, I'll look. I feel you all so close and so sorry to be late. Obviously, from what you just said, Jesse, the theme of community must be up. I would love to share on that. Matthew and Nicole, his wife, came to visit me in, it was like 100 years ago now. Matthew, it was so incredible. So I joined this group online, a three-week program, an accelerator program with this Egyptian woman, in her late 60s, real deal. Did a ritual on the Saturday. Matthew and I made the little film together immediately afterwards with me doing my movement work in the water, released all these old thoughts, set fire, wrote them down, set fire, released them into light. Then Sunday morning, we were meant to have a concert in my garden for mine and Gary, my third partner, who is my bestie, soul sister. We were going to have a 10-year anniversary party with my partner Matt being there, and all our friends, and didn't feel any preparation brewing for it at all. Didn't think it was going to happen, weirdly. And obviously Matthew and Nicole are visiting, and Matthew and I had the most amazing day on Saturday together. And then Nicole arrived in the afternoon. So I was very much in the energy of that. And his brother had disappeared for about 4 days. And we all suspected that he had died, either commit suicide or overdose, because he He has addictions with drugs and alcohol. So Gary at that point was saying, I don't know if I can go ahead with this. A lot of intensity. It's the new moon about 5 a.m., 6 a.m. I wake up early thinking, fuck, I've got so much to do for the party. And my dog has woken me up and I go back to bed. And I enter into a state which I knew wasn't a dream. And I've subsequently discussed it with Georgina, my mentor and teacher. And she said it absolutely wasn't a dream. And I come across this pillar. I approach a pillar. It represents life to me. And I'm really glad there's traffic. I'm never glad there's traffic so I can see. It's square and it's in front of me. And I realize this is my chance again. From the age of 7, I was outside of life, couldn't be more unworthy, perpetually. Different degrees, I compensate, etc. And I come to face it again. This is my chance. I get to enter into life now. I've done so much. And I approach it and the voice is there. Like beyond disbelief that I'm even bothering to show up again. Like, haven't we established this? There's no possibility you could think you belong to this world, anything. You're as unworthy as you've ever been because you couldn't be less unworthy. And it is so clear in that moment that it's true what it's saying. From its perspective, it is true. And I see the outside of the pillar and it's like marble, but it isn't marble. It's like a plaster effect. And I feel, and it almost goes almost like the evidence. Just look at you, look at this. Like, it's not even nasty. It's so cold. And I accept it completely. I accept it as in like, I completely deflate and I feel completely withdrawn and shut down. And I start to walk away thinking, fuck, like I at least had hope after the age of 7 that perhaps I could hang in there, even though I knew it was kind of a damned state. Perhaps something might change. There might be some kind of grace. So as I'm walking away, I take 3 steps away. And with each moment, I'm feeling it fully in my body. Like I say, it's not a dream. This crushed, totally crushed now. Because if after 20 years of alchemy and everything I've done, everything I've given and been and done to somehow come around what I believed at age 7, it was even worse than what happened at 7, that I felt at least there was the modicum of hope because I was 7. But 51 ain't going to get better if it hasn't gotten better in this time. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, I think had what had happened continued, it would have been a slow suicide from that point, because I would have just allowed, I've never ever felt anything that desperate, dark, overwhelming, ever. So I take 3 steps away from the pillar and the pillar is starting to fade. And it's me, it's not an angel, it's not another intervention of another being. It's some aspect of me, my heart, whatever we call it, that says, get back right there. Get here. And I'm so deflated, the part of me represented in this state. I don't resist even that. There's nothing to resist. There's nothing there. And it brings me back and it speaks through my mouth, this part of me, and says, yeah, this and this, definitely. Couldn't agree with you more. This doesn't go. But this isn't real. And my hands come up and the plaster falls away and it reveals this column of gold in the center of that. And then same to me, the plaster falls away, the mismatch, and it's exactly the same. And it's not like I belong to it. I am it. And it happens in that moment, that seeing, that knowing. And I wake up from it and I stay in bed for a little while, aware that something has happened and I feel completely different. And then I have the incredible fortune of Matthew and Nicole being at the house. Gary then calls saying his brother is still missing. We say, we can't go ahead with this. And I'm feeling like something is completely lifted. And then Gary comes over and within 10 minutes of coming over, he gets the call that his brother is alive. So we've come out of the worry, shock, oh my God, drama energy of it all. And then I slowly let this feeling of these feelings of anger and sadness start to rise, but not at Gary at all, more at my partner, Matt, because I feel like we're all slipping into me managing the day. I'm thinking about you, Matthew, and Nicole, like, okay, they don't want to be in a place that's too busy, and we've got to find this and that. And then Matt wants to have a session with Nicole, and I'm starting to feel what's happening, and all these feelings I haven't allowed in my life in playing this perfect balance game. Something's been so I start to feel very agitated, and I let this be voiced. And then I say to everyone, I said, look, I just need you to fucking do something to celebrate today, because this was going to be a really big day for us. And so everyone says, what do you want to do? And I said, let's just go get some nice cakes from this great bakery. So we're sitting there, and this is the community bit. Nicole looks at me, and we're in this really nice cunty East London bakery. It's really great space, we're hanging out, we're relaxed, we're not talking anything mystical, nothing. And she says, oh my God, you're shape-shifting in front of me. You've become this priest that I knew in Egypt. And it's, I think, no coincidence that I'm working for the first time in my life, even though I'm half Egyptian, my mom's Egyptian. I haven't gone anywhere near the lineage at all, at all. I've been waiting for the right time. So feeling that, I was making love with my partner, Matt. And at the point of orgasm, I spontaneously said the word Ptah, and I said it 3 times, which is the Egyptian god associated with bringing his word into the world, the architect of the world. And I saw a face, and that isn't something I've ever had happen before. So lots going on with Egypt. She sees me and she says, I was with you in Egypt, and you were this priest, or this like shaman priest, but you lived in complete isolation, away from everywhere and everyone. But I would come to visit you, as would others, and we would train with you. And as she said this, I felt this huge sadness and acknowledgement. Then in the evening, my partner Matthew had a session with Nicole, and he came down. I was making dinner. Matthew, Ashdown, me and Gary were watching RuPaul's Drag Race. So we're kind of in the jovial, but I'm also feeling this stirring of something that's really agitated. And then Nicole and my Matt talk about the session. And Nicole says, yeah, it came up very clearly. You and Matt are twin flames. And some of you know we've separated twice, the 3rd chapter of our relationship. And it's really remarkable now. But she said, you really are there to really potentially grow into the most remarkable partnering in the level of growth, which is what twin flames do. But my God, it's tough. And she said, Matt has a lot of ice around him where he's shut down. And if you let yourself be, Neo, you're like the sun, and your energy is so strong, but it causes his ice to melt, and it can melt quite fast. And that's a lot. And all at once, everything hit me that I'd been feeling so much of my life, but within worthy, unworthy, or unworthy, that wasn't even an option to feel. So in what opened in the morning, I just thought, this is fucking great, isn't it? Like, if I am myself and let myself be, I lose everything and everyone. And Matt has let me know that in no uncertain words of being too much in that sense. And Matthew and Nicole were on my left. I was at the end. I just made this pasta for us all. And I was very agitated. On the right was Gary and Matt. And the 4 of them held space for me to articulate aloud this fundamental fear that if I am myself, there is no community. And I just said from the bottom of my heart, just don't leave. And I was basically saying it to everyone. It seemed like I was saying it to Matt. It's like, I'm so happy to let go of the shaping. Matt called me out on still my shaping. You need to change energy, even though it's much more subtle and clever. And I said, you're absolutely right. It's fruitless. Just don't leave. Not meaning don't leave me as my boyfriend or partner. Just, I don't want to lose people. Again, I want to be in community. And in that moment, pretty much, then Nicole said to me, just very, very clearly, even beyond the words with the impact, she said, for as long as you leave yourself, you will project that onto everyone. And pretty much in that moment, something happened. And then over the few days afterwards, I realized there is no community without that centered authenticity. Everything else is the tribe. It's these pacts of whoring and fear. And I realized it wasn't a choice I had to make anymore. And in fact, the depth of community that is possible, that I know Yamith you speak to so often, if not every time, the witnessing of what we have co-created here as a community, the depths of authenticity and trust are simultaneous. So thank you, darlings. That's my share.
Thank you, Neo. That was beautiful. Love you.
Yeah, I echo that. That was really beautiful and touching. Yeah, thank you.
Even Kitty put her paws together.
Mhm. I have to say, guys, that it was like a timeless weekend as well. You know, it's like this was at the tail end of the journey, and it's like, oh, I've just got 3 days here with Neo, but that didn't come up at all. It's like it was an immersion in the field, so to speak, for a few days. But what there was, like, when I knocked on the front door and he opens the door, there's no sense of like, hey, I'm meeting you for the first time. It's like, da-da-da. It's like I'd just gone out for groceries and he was letting me back in the house. There is this sense of familiarity. And I think that this space and this like exploration together really creates is that when we meet each other, it was the same when I met Phil last year, you know, for the first time in person. And, you know, and meeting Richard Rudd, like the guy is, you know, because I've had people say this to me that, you know, oh, wow, you're the same person in person as you are when you're teaching and presenting. And it's like, good. And that's the same with Richard. He's the same person that you see, you know, when he's doing his webinars and as he is, or his podcasts, as he's that easy to interact with. And so when I was with Neo this whole weekend, it was just like this, it was like we'd known each other forever, which we probably have. This is just like reconnecting after a blip in time. But just, there was just a naturalness in communication and everything the whole week. And we both kind of questioned at the end, why are we going? Don't I live here? You know, it was like, it felt that familiar. So, I just wanted to say that I really encourage that, like that we do find, we co-create these moments of communitas. I know Howard and George and Jesse and others had it at the Into the Mystic recently, but yeah, it was a really special weekend. And it was a great finale to the 2 weeks in England as well. So I recommend it. And interestingly enough, Neo was in a 7 Sacred Seals group with me last year, and he's hosted 3 of us from that group. I think he's got Deirdre's coming this week, is it? Or next week after? There was me last week, and then there was Jason the week before. And so he's actually had there were 7 in that group working with the 7 Sacred Seals, and 6 of the 7, including himself, will have been in his house by the end of the week after next, or whatever that is. Yeah. So I just want to say that I really appreciated it. I'd never seen Rupal before. So it was really interesting watching it with the 2 of them and their critiquing of the whole experience. And, but it was just, yeah, I highly encourage the in-person moments of communitas.
I just got to recommend watching RuPaul with someone who has a photographic memory is a whole nother level. Because when Matthew starts referring to character names of different queens within a sketch, oh, is that the one that played? I'm like, what the fuck is that? And like your level of focus, like it was no different than being in the Delta group with you watching that episode of RuPaul. I was going to say that was a next level experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Interesting.
It was incredible with you, Matthew, because Matthew and we sat down, and like Matthew just said, it just felt like it was timeless. And I ended up, I don't know if you've already shared this, but we sat together and Matthew had talked a lot about Merlin and all of his journeys in Wales. And is it okay if I talk about what happened, Matthew? Yeah. Damien Nola, very good friend of mine, he initiated me into the Merlin lineage a year and a half ago. And that's my lineage. And as I was hoping, because we'd had the party on Sunday, Damien was coming, Matthew, and I thought, this is it, it's perfect. And Matthew and Damien have spoken a tiny bit. And I said, I hope Damien can initiate you into it. And we were sitting in my garden and I just heard from Merlin, it's like, I can do this. And that was my initiation into initiating. And with Matthew, and we sat in my garden in the most incredible energy with parakeets all around us and magpies. And it really was magical, Matthew. And so you opened that up in me profoundly. All of this happened on the same weekend. Everything, just all at once, this sense of the magic. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Neil, I've got a question. You're talking in your, well, I don't know where it was in your dream state or the waking state, but about how your brilliance or your essence thawed the ice of your partner, Matt. And I'm wondering if you could say more about that. What's your responsibility, or what's your part of that to either not allow that to happen, or is that part of being yourself to allow that to happen, or just what are the energies that are taking place there?
From the way Nicole described it, and also my experience of it, it happens totally. There's no intending of it. There's nothing I'm doing at all. It's, I suppose, purpose gene key. It's the nature of me just showing up, like standing behind someone in a supermarket queue versus my art alchemy or detail or anything like that. And we had an argument, the silliest thing. Like, he wanted to go out on this boat in 2 weeks' time with a friend of ours. And I just spent the weekend with her. And I just said, look, I've got a big retreat coming up in 2 weeks' time. It's probably the biggest event of my life. Well, definitely the biggest event of my life. And I'd already said to him, I want to be in a quiet space. So immediately, and I said, don't want to go. And he went into this huge thing of, oh, you're wrong. You're wrong for not wanting to do this. And I got quite upset by it. And we're on taxi. And I knew something was amiss, and by the time, and I didn't bite back. I didn't go into this, you're bullying, blah, blah, blah. I allowed it to go to the next day. And I said, what was going on yesterday? What's going on for you? That is just really off. Like, what is this? And he's like, yeah, you just, and once I held my ground, he said, I don't want to have this conversation. I'm on the train. I said, we're having it now. I'm not having this for the whole day. And then he said, I just feel like I'm your +1 at the moment. And I just said it so directly to him. I said, I'm letting go completely of everything. As you know, I said, my energies are opening. It's like, step your pussy up. It's like, don't take this shit out on me. Just do whatever you need to do to meet that. Do not fucking take it out on me. If I am causing some kind of reaction where you feel like that, just do whatever you need to do to be with yourself in that way. And if you want to have that conversation with me, I'm so here for it as your partner, but I'm not going to have it thrown in as, oh, you in this bullying manner around what I just simply want to do or not do on a weekend before a big event. And he so heard me, and he was so clear. And I think we got lost in that for so many years in our relationship, of where it came down to behavior, when in fact this was always what was there. That just acknowledging that the more that I relaxed into myself, it had a catalytic effect. That didn't mean that he shouldn't be uncomfortable with it or comfortable with it, or he was lucky or unlucky. It was none of that. It just was. And we saw that, Chris. We just saw that we are twin flames and we are partners. And this is what happens if I am myself and it has a reaction. Let's stay with that. Let's not dramatize it. And so it's not like I'm measuring it now. And I measured it my whole life, because it accompanied all the narratives from the age of 7, knowing this and knowing that prior to 7, which is why I believed it. When I had the experiences of racism, that's why I was primed to believe it, because I knew that was my nature as a little kid. I was the sun, and I have an allergy to the sun for about 25 years now. I come out in a really intense heat rash if I'm in the sun. And so I'm coming into my nature. And it's not something that brings me into worthy or unworthy anymore. Now I've had the experience that I had with the pillar. It's nothing to measure against. Am I too much? Am I too little? I could only be answered through that relationship with the plaster pillar that I already knew the answer to that and was shown it unequivocally. So now I'm out of that measurement with him. I'm not directed by it. Well, he's my lifeline to having something before everyone else runs away. It's like, no, I am life. So I don't know if that answers it at all.
Yeah,
A little bit.
I think so. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That brings up something else that's I've been noticing with me recently. I've just been attracting these events in relationship where I'm being pushed to, given these gentle shoves to ask for what I want. And that also feels like a really key thing in any kind of relationship, let alone community, to be able to know what it is I desire or what it is I want, and to ask other people for it without expecting them to actually provide that, but just to be able to. So I've had several incidents where someone said something, and I've also done the same as what you just described, Neo, kind of not biting back or not taking the bait or something and letting it sort of settle in me for a while, which is always uncomfortable for me. Letting all of the emotional waves pass and all of the different mental perspectives that I could have on that particular issue. And then coming to a place of more centeredness where I can then kind of say to this, bring it up to the other person and sort of say, without any feeling of resentment or bitterness inside me, to be able to sort of say, hey, when you said this the other day, this it brought up a lot of stuff for me, and I wonder if you'd mind doing this instead, or asking me something before offering my services or something like that. And it's an aspect of kind of boundary in a way. The other side of it is the ability to say no to someone. Like, I'm not going to take on your shit. I'm willing to listen to you, but I don't want to be shamed by you today, or that's your story, it's not mine. And for me to be able to discern that is a big kind of leap in my learning, I think. And then for me to be able to speak it to someone is also that's a kind of ongoing journey for me. But I notice how important it is, because it's an aspect of honesty in relationship that I don't think relationships can survive without, essentially.
And that reminds me of Howard's, when he was quoting that we have all these behaviors so that we don't get seen. It seems like these behaviors are also in a relationship. So here's the dance, we dance together so that we can't see ourselves. You're kind of breaking through that dance. So wait a second, I didn't want to be on this dance floor.
And I think in that codependency that was at the heart of, I think, my relationship with life, and certainly my partners, when you when you feel their discomfort at an empathic level, that whatever the catalyst that you are or aren't, with all the shadow or the gift or whatever's coming in, that feeling of some kind of responsibility or the rescuer role was so entangled in all of this bullshit of, fine, if you actually are just yourself and we're not giving it a big label of being the sun or whatever, but there's a brightness or there's an intensity, let's just call it intensity there, that causes this impact, and you can recognize it's occurring in another person without the rescuer codependent role. It's just what's happening. And if we can have compassion for the fact that they may be a bit more volatile around that, but like you just said, Phil, not bite back in the moment, because it's not going to be fruitful, any conversation then, and not capitulate to any of this in any idiot compassion way. To actually just remain present. It required me to come out of that codependency, and that was my entire strategy. If I can quickly add, after the whole experience of the pillars, a few days later, I got these boys, I was cycling through the marshes, on the way back from the ceramic studio, they threw water balloons at me as I was cycling. I never had that happen in my life. And I realized that within this codependent relationship with life from the age of 7, I'd been invisible in a certain kind of way and nannied. And I felt like the fact that I got hit, it was so innocuous. It didn't hurt, didn't throw me off, didn't cause injury. But I thought, fuck, that never ever happened. And then a few other little misfortunes happened. And I thought, oh, I'm in the game. And in that sense, I think to step into relationship with my partner, with life, to go, oh, actually, there is causality here. I actually don't have to play the role of rescued or rescuer. I can, and my finances have never been as bad as they've been right now. Slightly got better when I asked a couple of people that owed me money. But I thought, I'm 51. I don't have to play this game of needing to rescue others and or be rescued all the time. And I think in that sense of being able to step into a relationship with my partner and actually just show up beyond all the drama and story of I'm the sun, he's got ice. Oh, what a combo. It's like, just get on with it. Just live. It makes it much easier for him if he's got ice melting to be in front of someone who isn't insane, trying to measure everything like Goldilocks. It's like, if I'm in my center and my sanity and clarity, and ice is melting or sun is happening or whatever it is, that's all that's happening. And I think it's probably effortless at that point. But for as long as I am giving it the meaning of unworthy, worthy, all of that shit, rescue me, I need to rescue you. Beyond sun and ice, anything's going to trigger that's got any kind of energy to it. And that's the only thing I feel like. Thank you for letting me say that. Thank you.
And that reminds me that, Chris, you were saying something about power earlier, and what came up for me when you talked about that, it was, I know I'm afraid of power because there's a distorted perception of what power means in me, that it's more that I'm worried about corruption, or worried about it could turn to violence, or turn to this, or turn to that. But essentially, I think quite often we're worried about or afraid of empowerment, self-empowerment, because of those kinds of entanglements with codependency and other people, and the effect that we might have, that what we bring out in another person just by being who we are. And that seems to, it creates a storybook of a ton of different stories, that all these short stories that are just sort of playing over and over in the background somewhere, and sometimes we misperceive the essence of the story, but that's what sort of sticks out for us. Like, oh, if I'm myself, then this person's going to be really upset, or really pissed off, or really angry and rageful, or vengeful, or whatever. So I better not be myself. I better, and this is coming back to the wild man that I was talking about earlier. Like, I better lock that piece of me away for good, and put the key somewhere safe. So yeah, it seems like a lot of the work that we're doing, and this is perhaps where we find this commonality. I think several people mentioned that, where we find this commonality is like, we're trying to undo all of the locks. We're trying to find the key and let these parts of us back out, and learn to accept them, learn to integrate them again.
I think we have so many examples from childhood of when we were totally ourselves and got wounded, got burnt, or hurt others. And those are the locks that we're trying to unravel. Oh, I actually can be myself and not hurt somebody else. I can be fully in my power and not hurt somebody else.
Hey, I'm going off subject a bit because I've been dying for the whole session to show you this bird I came across. And so can you give me permission to share screen, Tom?
Do you have it saved on your PC, or you can share the link to? Oh, now you're the co-host. Yeah.
This is the great-eared nightjar. And on some of the photos I saw of it, it was it just looked like a dragon. It was
Yeah, I was
just
gonna
this-
say that looks like a dragon.
And when it opens its mouth, it's actually got this huge mouth, gaping mouth that's a bit dragon-like. It's quite an incredible thing.
You've just run into the picture or that actual creature?
I ran into the picture, not the creature. I think
Oh.
it's Australian, but I'm not sure.
That's pretty cool. Cool.
That's my bit of trivia for today. The great-eared nightjar.
Well, I've applied to be one of the hosts with the upcoming seminar on the Dream Arc. So I'm hoping that that helps. And my Novocaine is wearing off, so I'm about ready for some aspirin and a nap.
What was that, Jesse?
That's my tea setup. That's this dragon. It just reminds me of that bird.
Nice.
And I've got yeah, I was initiated by Richard during the thing into this tea lineage, and it's like awoken something inside of me. So I had a weird go with Kung Fu, where in 2000 I remembered Kung Fu, and it was really weird. It was just like felt like Neo in the Matrix or something, where it was just like, okay, I know this now, and it was really bizarre, hard to integrate. But I have this familiarity with Kung Fu, and it turns out that when you're ordained in the Shaolin lineage, you take on the name SHI, and that's my middle name. That's my father's mother's genealogical name, and so my middle name is literally the sacred name that you take on when you are ordained in Kung Fu. And so I just have a feeling that lifetimes and lifetimes were spent in this muscle memory of the way, and plenty of the hardship and the murder and all of that stuff. But also this tea has spoken to me in such a crazy way, where it's like this, they call it Gong Fu Cha, and it's like the Kung Fu of tea. And so I've been like resisting it for a long time. And then ever since Into the Mystic, I've been like a little obsessed. And so anyway, I've always collected these figurines. And this is part of the tea ceremony too, are these little tea friends. So I have my kin creature here, the mantis, and a rabbit, and a elephant, and the dragon too. So anyway, thanks for sharing the dragon bird. What is it called, Phil? The long-eared
The great-eared nightjar.
nightjar.
Mm.
Cool.
Thanks for this exquisite session, guys.
Yeah, I recorded it for those that came in late and wanted the initial question. I don't know that if we actually got to the actual part of what Howard was talking about. It went in the direction of community, but I'm thinking it goes way beyond that. It's like we are gonna live differently. We're gonna have to connect differently and earn differently and survive differently. And how does that look?
You know, one of my two particular moments of inspiration in this call for me, it started with Chris being in his brother's bar with the rednecks, but what he put his focus on is where the common ground was. I mean, he saw put his focus on where could he find his common ground, and where was the light within them. And then Jesse talking about, the redneck guys across the street, kind of rough characters. So he didn't talk about the Gene Keys and walking with Toth. He talked about cars. But what it really provoked in me was an awareness that in every human interaction, while it might first arise in me to note the difference and maybe feel an aversion or feel I'm being othered. I mean, we really get to choose in the moment, through what lens we want to see the person or persons that we are engaging. And it is, and the power that our choice has in that moment to how we orient to that engagement to influence the relational field that we then experience. And, I wonder if we don't have, it's occurring to me that we have the choice to experience the phenomena of community in any given moment just by deciding to orient to the best in other people and look for that and find the common ground, no matter how immediate our story is about how different we are. So that was just, in every different, and then, one of the things that's just occurring to me, 10 years ago when I was in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia, and spent 6 or 7 years doing diversity work and bringing Blacks together with whites and sometimes Hispanics, there was a lot of outward diversity, and I really was energized by that. But now I'm sitting here with basically a bunch of other white men. There's as much diversity, there's much richness, as much flavor. I mean, but it just makes the common ground that we're discovering that much more exquisite. This is a phenomenal group that we've got. And I also want to shout out to Yamath. You're constantly bringing attention to that, for which we all appreciate. But there's something really special here for sure.
I liked the piece as well where Jesse was sharing about the neighborhood too, because I can totally relate to that for my neighborhood. And I love it for that reason, like the diversity of people in this hood. And it does challenge me. It's like you just said, Howard, it's like, what is that piece in common? What do I have in common? Because it's not Gene Keys, not with anybody here. But, my neighbor 5 doors down, it turns out that he used to write for a pagan newspaper. And so I was talking about my travels to the Preseli Hills, and, it just opened up. He's like, oh, I've got 2 stones from the Preseli Hills as well. And it's just like, it just opens up these kinds of conversations. And me and Nicole both work, both of our work kind of revolves around working in spiritual conversations and happenings in a daily basis. And we both fucking appreciate it, that it's like there's a difference, that there's differences, that there's different conversations to be had out there, because it brings that, yes, the diversity in life and the connection to all of life, and it also means it's not all about healing and stuff like that, which we work in so often, right? It branches it out to having conversation about our mutual love of the lake here with people. It's like we don't have spirituality in common at all, but we all are here because we appreciate the nature. We appreciate the lake. We're all a bunch of hermits out here coming together in communitas. So I feel that was a real big takeaway for me in this too, or takeaway, but standout for me in this too, is that that's what's needed right now. It's not, oh, where's my community that's all just like me and thinks like me and does everything the same as me. It's like, where's the community that comes alive through the diversity of life and being and connecting? And that's what excites me about it too.
Yeah, but your neighbors are mooses and bears and cranes.
Yeah. Well, actually, cougar. We had when Howard was reading about Zach Bush's story. It's like some girls next door had that experience with a cougar on my street the other day. They came face to face with the cougar that was walking down the street, and I'm not talking a cougar with a handbag. I'm talking the cougar with the big snarly teeth that just stares them down. But yes, there's a lot of animals, but there are humans here too, Tom. Quite a few of us. I don't know if we're human, actually. Maybe not, I shouldn't say human. Human form.
Yeah, one other observation, I'll kind of ask a question with it. It's occurring to me that there's something of our coming into right relationship with the natural world, and in harmony with that is integral to expressing the nature, our true nature in relationship with others in ways that is community oriented. It's like ultimately I don't think that we can be one with one another. It's only being one with nature and through nature that we find ourselves into being one with one another. And I've long been intrigued, Matthew, by your relationship with Merlin, and it's fascinating now to hear that Neo also has a connection with that lineage. And it got me curious, and I went out and just found an article real quick. But the first thing that I turned to, and
yeah, now that's Merlin.
reading about Merlin, is this that is getting further and further removed from nature. Yeah, and it says people still feel a call to return to the natural world, and Merlin is their emissary into these distant, dreamy, and magical places. So, like now, all of a sudden, my interest in Merlin is just 10x'd. But yeah, it's just appreciate y'all bringing that thread into this fellowship. It's a cool nugget.
Maybe tomorrow's conversation with Jesse on Gene Key and Myth, where we bring in Hermes, might bring in a common thread for, especially for those who are like, I have no connection to Merlin whatsoever, but maybe there's a connection to another of Hermes' guises that might speak to you. We've got that conversation tomorrow, so maybe that'll bring more alive, Howard.
It's very interesting what you say, Howard, with regards to the lineage. Zach Bush, that podcast I think I mentioned before, he said when you look at the Oxford English Dictionary definition of nature, they literally define it as anything that is not human or made by humans. He goes, how fucked up is that? Like literally everything except us. And so he talks about what happens at a biological level when cells come out of synergy into isolation, and they become cancerous. And he says the same happens with us when we come out of sync with each other and nature. So I think it couldn't be more resonant. That one of the things with the Merlin lineage is the nature of embodiment being at the center. That sense of embodiment, potency, freedom, love is how I would describe it. And so the showing up at the realm that can so often in many spiritual traditions be negated of form. If you think about Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism, it's all an illusion. And at some level, any kind of element of desire leads to suffering. And so our relationship with the natural world at any level is problematic within so many ascendant traditions. And so with an embodied lineage, such as the Merlin lineage, which in my case goes back to interesting India. So I don't know if we've shared this, that Mahindra is an avatar about 4,500 years ago, and he was an avataric expression of the ascendant Merlin energy. So it sits at the same table as whatever the Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness, just distinct from Hermes and Thoth. Hermes is credited as the father of alchemy in that sense. And so if Merlin holds that integrated energy that is very much about embodiment and that experience of the I am simultaneously with that creative element, then it very aligns with alchemy as an integrational practice. But that sense of the historical Merlins that we know such as the Arthurian ones, they were heads of lineages. They were human beings that had journeys like us, that were the heads of those lineages for the last 4,500 years. But we can also connect more readily and more effectively to Mahindra as an avatar. Just it's more accessible in that field. Or we can connect to the ascendant energy of the Merlin, which hasn't taken form, but that is harder to ground into the juicy sensuality of our isness. So at some point, perhaps if any of you are interested, perhaps it sounds like you might be Howard, I want to start to put together the possibilities of workshops directly with initiation, now that it's happened with Matthew. Because my understanding of what has emerged since the experience with the pillar is becoming clearer by the second as to what I can support and what delights me in that sense of support. So I don't know if that's in any way useful as it relates to nature and connectivity and community, that it's impossible, like you say, from that perspective, for us to imagine anything beyond the nonsense of the tribe when we are disconnected from nature and ourselves. Like Nicole said, we'll project it onto everything.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, and Nia, real quick, because you hopped on after I mentioned it, because you brought Zach Bush to our attention. I guess it was like 4 to 6 weeks ago in that very profound podcast. He just had a new podcast released in the last week with on stage with Richard, and they have like a 2-hour riff going back and forth. The podcast is Deja Blue, but I posted a link in the Messenger channel. So it's Zach riffing on all the stuff he brought up in the podcast you brought to us with Richard. So it's good shit.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to that.
I don't know what Neo's channeling right now, but his face is gone. Has he gone super red on everybody else's screen?
It's my root base. I'm on fire. No, it's the red lights in front of me. Yeah, it's my time. It's definitely spiritual. It definitely isn't the red lights in front of me on the car in a tunnel. Definitely not that. Definitely not that. Don't look at the light. Like, don't look behind the screen. Yeah, it's the Merlin lineage coming in.
So just to mention a book that I just got done listening to called Ways of Being by James Brittle. And he plays with this kind of view that we have of technology and nature, and really spends the whole book on that technology really is an aspect of nature. It's a reflection of nature. It's our building reflection of nature, but it's based on nature. It isn't anything away from nature. So then the definition becomes animals, trees, plants, rivers, rocks, humans, everything that humans build. It's all nature.
One of the things Zach says in response to that, Chris, is that when he uses the word technology, I love it. If we think of the Aquarian age as the age of technology, and it's like the vase that carries the water rather than the water itself in the image of the water bearer, he describes humans as the most advanced technology that nature has made to bear witness to beauty. So he sees us as a technology, that nature is the architect of technology versus nature, or us versus nature, and our technology versus nature is the worst thing. It's like, no, we are an expression of that. And that includes our egos, that capacity to differentiate. Like Adyashanti says, an ego is very useful if you're hungry, you know which mouth to put the food in. I don't put it in Howard's mouth instead of mine. I put it in mine if I'm hungry, even though at one level we are all one. But that individuation, and I think we're having a 26 gene key. When I first read it, I was like, sounds a bit shit. And this girl, Natasha in Oroville, was saying, wow, you get to have the gene key of ego as your purpose. And I thought, that's a bit shit. Before I really understood anything, but that sense of how do we connect to artfulness from that space of that individuation and see it as a technology. I think dolphins have it as well. And it's seen because they, whilst doing lots of amazing things, they also can rape and torture. So it's seen that they can, some of them take, if the word is pleasure, I don't know if that's accurate, in the suffering of others. And they see that as the shadow aspect of their capacity for individuation. So there are a few other animals that seem to be able to use that technology or misuse that technology. So I love it. I love the idea that we are that within that expression of nature. And he also says, look, if we, with the amount of carbon we put into the air, because he loves carbon, he says, if we go extinct and we bring about the sixth extinction, the amount of life that will be on the planet, however millions of years it takes to resurface, is going to be so incredible. So he says, the expression of nature, we don't need to worry with the big picture of what he is creating. In the Egyptian tradition, I found out that they have a Father Earth as well as Mother Earth. They have both. They look at it as being a masculine and a feminine being, which I love. Always sensed that about her. I mean, very much the mother and the father.
And I read recently that there's a sky mother as well as a sky father. And if you go back far enough, we never used to genderize, genderize, or I don't know what the word would be, all of these things. And yeah, it's kind of refreshing to switch those around. Sky Mother, Father Earth. I also love the fact that the Merlin is the 3-mark animal for the 26th city.
Yeah, I love that, the interplay, and that's huge in the Hermetic philosophy, which comes from Hermes and Thoth and all of that. It's like everything has gender, it has polarity, but it's actually not just that, you know, everything is nested. And so been playing a lot with that. You know, the sun is often masculine and the moon is often feminine, but in other lineages, it's reversed. The polarity is switched. And yeah, I really love that. So I chose not to explore the Richard Rudd and Zach Bush one this past week in preparation for our Gene Keys and Myth call, which is about Thoth or Hermes, because Richard also did a talk with Robert Edward Grant, who is one of my favorite philosophers, polymath, like whatever. And it's awesome. It starts with Blue kind of with a trickstery look in her eye, asking Richard and Robert to form a bridge. She's trying to form a bridge between their philosophies. And she asked them to both speak of Hermes. And Richard kind of pauses and he gets like, he like shifts in his seat. I haven't really seen him do that. And he says, you know, I've never shared this with anyone, but he kind of spoke that the whole transmission from the Gene Keys, as we know, the Gene Keys comes from his relationship with Hermes. And so I just found that so unbelievably fascinating and exciting. And so I look forward to getting into the other podcast, the Zach Bush podcast, this weekend and next week. But if you haven't checked out the Robert Edward Grant and Deja Blue one, it's yeah, it's pretty amazing as well.
All right, guys, it was a pleasure. Now, this time, I'm leaving. All the best. Bye.
Bye, Amit.
See ya, but I got to cut
Bye.
out too. Thanks, guys. That was great.